Graveyard Keeper's the kind of game that keeps you guessing. And oh man, did it keep me guessing. Buckle up, Buttercups, because this is the strangest and silliest game I've ever played. And just to add a bit of spice of my own, I dove into this fever dream with one rule: don't look anything up. Ever. So, without a single drop of wisdom to save me from the zaniest fails ever, I played 100 days of Graveyard Keeper. I started things off walking home on a classic dark and stormy night, and received a call from my love. Then I had a little bit of an oopsie. Next thing I knew, I found myself here, where this mysterious figure stood mysteriously. He told me a new chapter in my life had begun, and that if I ever wanted to go home again, I had to be a good graveyard keeper. Oh, and also that I had to dig up somebody named Gary. Maybe Jerry? And with that, my new life began. And the shenanigans, the absolute buffoonery, started immediately. Holy sard, I'm a skull. Well, are you Gary? Because I'm supposed to be finding someone named The man told me you'd answer all my questions, and man have I got a lot of them. Good old Gary Jerry was in just as much disbelief as I was, and he couldn't remember anything besides that this donkey was important. Got a fresh corpse from the town. Yup, this guy talks too, and he sure doesn't seem to like capitalism. The situation is deeply humiliating, you know where I'm coming from, right, comrade? Grab that juicy corpse while it's still fresh. Jerry seemed to think I needed to bring said juicy thing into this morgue, where I'd put the body on the autopsy table. What kind of game is this? Slice some flesh from the corpse. In exchange for telling me how to get home, this absurd little skull man wanted me to take some meat from a mystery corpse I got from a communist donkey, and then trade it in a tavern for beer and bring him the beer. I told you this one was wild, folks. There were some interesting skulls that seemed to reference quality, but I didn't learn much about this yet. I did manage to extract the mystery meat and learned a few recipes to use it in. I brought the body to the graveyard, where Jerry told me how to make graves. Carefully put the body, or what remains of it, in the grave. I placed and dug a new gravesite, tossed the body in, and received this burial certificate. The alcoholic cranium told me this was my ticket to money before spotting my new boss rolling up. Meet the bishop. He told me my graveyard sucked, and I could never be promoted until I fixed the quality of the graveyard, which apparently meant I had to clean this place up. Apparently, I could confer with this lad every purple sun, whatever that means. He also told me about the village to the east and the town south of that. And finally, I learned about wood and stone technologies, 3 types of acquirable technology points, and these delightful technology trees to spend them in. Ooh! I had a screen to check the NPCs I knew, and a map mostly covered with fog. This nearby trunk had some spare tools in it, and this church building was locked for now. I started cleaning up the graveyard, and saw this blue energy bar ticking down quite quickly, along with this wheel of what I assumed were the 6 days of the week. I decided to get exploring, and found this gateway that was closed until the mail day. I stumbled into the village, and wandered into the Dead Horse Tavern. This man, named Horadric, seemed excited to see us, and he told me that he was contractually obligated to give me money, if he had it, in exchange for burial certificates, and that I'd have to entice people with my church to get more money flowing in this village. I proceeded to sell the mystery meat to the guy, but apparently, inappropriate meat was a problem in these parts. Can't imagine why. Unable to sell the meat with a literal royal stamp of approval, he informed me I could either buy an expensive legitimate one, or get a fake one from someone called Snake. Options. Interesting. Finally, after this man was done talking my head off, he gave me a letter to deliver to the local blacksmith, and I traded the burial certificate for beer and money. I noticed before I left that vendors like this could apparently be upgraded. This lady, Miss Charm, was much more succinct. You better talk with my husband, he's in charge around here. He's not only the tavern keeper, but also the elected head of the village. Okay. Besides, he really does like to talk. I noticed that. Truly exhausted from all that chit-chat, I accidentally mined this rock, and found the bishop leaving. Wait, no, I gotta open the church, dog! No, wait a minute! Not now, my son. No, my boy. Jerry accosted me before I could make it home, and he told me about some food things I could gather and cook. He poofed away before I could give him the beer, so I went looking, and stumbled into the cellar, where I found I had a guest. This interesting looking fellow, Snake, was just hanging out down here, but I couldn't get to him due to these fallen archways. By this point, I'd snagged 4 of the 125 achievements in this game, 2 for meeting NPCs, and 2 for my gravekeeping duties. I tried out sleeping for the first time, hoping it would save the game, and began to dynamically recover energy at the costly price of time. In other words, when I sleep has nothing to do with what day it is in-game. I ended that sleep as soon as the bar was full, only to awake to a ghost just standing, floating next to my bed. Sure, his name was Yorick, and he couldn't decide how he felt about anything, except one thing. He wanted me to dig a specific body up with this exhumation permission he gave me and throw it in the river. Considering I'd taken all my advice from a talking skull so far, I figured a ghost wasn't that much of a stretch. And I figured if this guy was going in the drink, I may as well relieve him of his meat first. On the way out the door, I handed Jerry his beer, and he told me to stop bragging about being from another world so I didn't end up being made into a heretic. Anyway, time to dump a body in the river because a ghost told me to. That's perfectly normal. No sooner had I begun to question what I'd done than Bouncing Skull Dude arrived to question my actions. And after judging me harshly, he ended up just telling me to burn it next time instead. Right. Let me know in the comments whether you're more of a dump in river or burn to ash kind of person. I'm sure YouTube won't question anything. Jerry also had more to say about how to get me home, mentioning a portal on which hill I could use. I could supposedly learn more about this escape plan via either the library in the church, which I didn't have access to, or by speaking with the astrologer, who I hadn't met yet. Apparently, I could find him at a lighthouse on Moon Day, but it wasn't quite Moon Day just yet, so I tried a few other things, like digging up these large stumps. Oh, that doesn't just go into my inventory. That's a big item. That makes sense. I can push it though. Can I pick up one and push another? Pro. And so the legacy of pushing logs across the land began. And so did the beginnings of crawling through these tech trees. I decided upkeeping the graveyard seemed like a bright idea. So I spent the first of my green and red points on simple gravestones so I could spruce them things up for Bossman Bishop. I gathered supplies to do just that, and noticed that chopping trees also yielded these big boy logs. The act of chopping gave these little tech points, and that these little mushrooms and flowers could be picked up off the ground. Repairing the graves turned out to be more complicated than I thought though, as I needed these wood and stone repair kits, and they were quite deep in the building tech tree. Further, each grave had a separate headstone and fencing, so double duty repairing was in order. I managed to repair one of the stone ones with some kits I'd been given, but I had no way to make more anytime soon. The only plan I had was to gather these red and green points by hitting stuff, but now I was out of energy, so that was off the table too. The commie donkey brought a new body that I couldn't de-meat, again lacking any energy, so it looks like there's gonna be a whole lot of napping on the job. I woke again to this gloomy ghost who taught me what those colored skulls do. Essentially, the quality of the bodies buried in the graveyard affect the quality of the graveyard. The red skulls, the not so good parts of the body, nullify the effects of gravestones and fencing up to the amount of red skulls. So I gotta get rid of those one way or another. Sure, okay. I headed back outside to work some more on gathering those tech points and smacked everything I could, getting red points, green points, stone, wooden sticks, logs, as well as berries and mushrooms, which gave a small bit of energy back when eaten. Once I got enough points to learn the technology for the stone repair kits, I snagged the technology in the tree, but I couldn't figure out where to craft the repair kits themselves. And this was only the beginning. How do I craft? Where does my crafting happen? Grindstone. No, I guess not. How do I craft stuff? No, I don't know how to craft stuff. This might be an issue. What's this? No, I feel like I'm supposed to know. Okay, I seem to be in a little bit of trouble. Is this crafting? No. Is this crafting? No. Is this crafting? No. Hey, can you tell me how to craft stuff? I don't have wine. How do I use the blueprints? I wandered around for so long and really struggled to work this one out. I think he said where the blacksmith was. I think it was the town. The path to the town is closed. You need a town pass. Right, and he told us where to get a town pass from, which was from completing the church. But I can't fix the church if I can't fix the graves. But I can't fix the graves if I can't... Ooh, buddy boy. I am in serious doo-doo here. How do I craft stuff? To crafting items, you need to unlock the relevant technology. Where do I craft them? Bro, where does the crafting happen? I don't understand. How do I craft? I want one of these. Crafted at Stonecutter. I finally noticed I've been given a blueprint for the Stonecutter with this as well, and managed to work out I needed to construct this in the area in front of my house. Can I build a Stonecutter? Holy sh**, but I need this. Where do I get flitch from? Ooh! And I couldn't yet craft flitch as I hadn't learned this technology here. Oops. Time to grind again. I spent the first half of the day laughing at myself before Jerry raised the alarm. The Inquisitor. Jerry was afraid of some sort of Inquisitor that had arrived. So now he wanted wine and reassurance. Anyone ever told you you're a little high maintenance, Jerry? I wanted to finish up my goals before I explored that, and I managed to learn and build a sawhorse next door. And then here I can craft flitch from... And then from the flitch, we can craft a stone cutter. Nails. Nails? We can't nails because we haven't talked to the smith yet, I believe. Such was my predicament. So I headed off to the foot of Witch Hill to investigate what this Inquisitor might be. And he had quite the voice. Go. After flexing his authority, he asked me if I'd like to join him at the witch burning ceremony. I accepted because I didn't want to be rude to someone with that level of authority, as I was quite enjoying not being burnt. He attempted to pry as to my origins, but this time I was vague, as to avoid arousing further suspicions. He also mentioned a ship of the dead or two. Apparently there were a lot of dead folks in the town, and my services were in high demand. Gotta say, that is concerning. Not to mention, hurrah! This is awful. The Inquisitor continued to inquire about my station. He asked me to be his friend, which I agreed to in order to avoid fiery death. That friendship was, of course, conditional. You will first have to show your goodwill. So, I have a couple of minor tasks for you. Okay. We can talk on the next mail day, or any other mail day. Am I to deal with this body? Actually, there is no body left. Guess that's that for her. I saw this, which kind of looked like a portal on Witch Hill type of thing, so at least I knew where to look in the future. I explored a bit further north, and found a few more interesting things like this ore-looking rock and this blocked path. And on the way back, whoa! After dodging those things successfully, I returned to the morgue to claim the meat from the 2-day-old body, and retrieved something called a sin shard from it as well. But I had no idea what that was. I began to peruse the large number of crafting stations in this game, before slapping more random things down in the yard for tech points. Well that's a bit eerie. Welcome to Moon Night. Moon Day? Welcome to Moon Day indeed. Time for a nap. I crawled out of bed when the sun was high in the sky and ran over to the village to see about the blacksmith business, as I wanted to get nails. I found this grumpy guy down in the southeast of the village and gave him this letter, who then pawned off the responsibilities in the letter to me. I dispatched some nearby green slimes for him in exchange for a sword and a whetstone to repair, and a little bit of knowledge about how to get and make iron. One step closer to nails, baby. Swinging the sword uses energy, regardless of if you hit, and the button to do it was spacebar, which I have to say was a very disorienting combo. Once it was said and done, I was able to acquire the technology for making nails and a wooden anvil. Scratch that, 2 steps closer to making nails. Oh, the bishop is gonna be back to we need to get the graveyard spick and span. The pressure was on. I needed to get this nail grind going. I used the sawhorse to make wood billets. Billets? I'm gonna go with billets. And I subsequently built the wooden anvil with those and simple iron parts. But in doing this, I had already messed up. Oh, but I need iron ingots. Okay, I gotta make a furnace. I lack one of the iron parts to make a furnace because I used 2 to make an anvil. I should've... Oh. I now had no way to make the furnace without a way to make iron for simple iron parts, and I was stuck once again. Oh man, if I just would read! If I would just read! I went back to the smith to purchase the single iron part I was missing, but he wasn't outside his shop like before. I left to try other avenues, but by the time I was halfway home, it was daytime, so I went back. The tracks on the ground are really indicative of how good of a job I'm doing right now, aren't they? I purchased the one rather expensive iron part to deal with the gooby boo boo I made last night, and I built this chunky boy. I went looking for ore to smelt in it. I had to fuel the thing as well, but all I had was sticks. It was enough to smelt 1 single bar, but it was moving really slowly. I buried that now 4-day-old corpse in the hopes to... Hey, wait. Well, that didn't quite work out. Maybe next week. I spent the rest of my energy and the durability of my pickaxe mining iron, and I grabbed my first iron ingot when I got home, and finally started crafting nails. But I ran out of energy. 1 sleep later, I really finally made the nails. With these, I made the stone cutter. I could finally craft the stone repair kits. I need simple iron parts and the clay, which I have never found. Ooh, buddy. The horse had brought a new body, presumably because I'd finally dealt with the first one. And after a swift flesh extraction, I tossed her in the ground. I'd basically forgotten these burial certificates were literally money for me. Instead, I decided to try out the wooden repair kit technology path. I built this carpentry bench. This went much better, as all I needed was wood and nails to make 4 kits at a time. So finally, after all this time, we've run out of energy. You gotta be kidding me. A few well-timed mushrooms saved the day, and I had really made at least some kind of repair kit on day 9. Probably a bit late, but you know, we made it, okay? Now we're talking. Let's fix this wooden grave fence. Yes! Let's fix this wooden marker. Yes! Let's fix this wooden cross. Yeah! I repaired everything wooden, which was enough to bring the quality all the way up to -3. You know, that doesn't sound great, but it was like -29 at the start, so this is progress. I investigated better options than literal sticks for fueling the furnace, and found I had everything I needed to learn and make firewood. So I got to work, and then immediately stopped because I ran out of energy. One big nap and new chopping spot later, I could now make firewood out of logs by first making them into billets. It was energy costly to have to make conversions, but quality fuel was quality fuel. Another sleep later, I was able to queue up 24 new ingots. Finally, after much strife, the iron supply was stabilizing. I started learning a few more things in the tech trees, but all the things that require blue are completely out of our reach. That was the trouble. I had 0 capacity to acquire blue points so far, so I couldn't learn anything with blue and its cost. I went to work repairing the tools and smacking trees and rocks for resources again, before draining the energy bar completely. Again. I just want to fix that bridge because maybe they said something about a swamp being over that direction, so I'm hoping that like maybe we can get clay over there. And so that's what I did. And once I had the supplies, I fixed the stone bridge with wood. Doesn't this look beautiful? I got a new achievement for this, and this is how those were looking so far. I found this fishing spot, but had no rod with which to fish. I found another blocked path, but had no supplies to unblock it. And I found iron ore, but had basically no energy to mine it. I waddled back over to the village, where I received a free beer for the slime work a few days ago, and traded my burial certs for some cash. Afterwards, I summed up my situation like this. I'm a little lost, but it's okay, because soon I will be found, ladies and gentlemen. On the way home, I found that I'd missed a night of witch burning by a small margin. Can't say I'm too sad about that one. I mean, hey, at least I had iron ingots to keep me warm at night. I had even more by the morning, and had an idea. Can I like remove the broken stone decorations and replace them with wooden ones? I can. I went to work, and I had to hurry, because the purple Sunday was already tomorrow again. Time flies in this game. I tossed this corpse I received during the crafting on the table, before realizing I needed energy to place these fences I'd crafted. And guess what I didn't have? All my energy vanished in mere moments, as crafting grave decor is apparently a very exhausting process. But I don't have energy to put the crosses down! So I had a little siesta, picked a couple of mushrooms, and placed down fences like my life depended on it. The quality rose to -1, but the energy was just not there. More mushrooms for the rest, and then more fencing, but again the energy burned out at quality 2. And I need a total of 5. I went to pick more mushrooms for energy, but it wasn't to be, and I can't pick it. I don't have enough. I slept in anguish that night, as the church remained a mystery once again. I started looking around at the bodies in the morning of day 14, and noticed a lot of them were densely packed with red skulls. And now you can kind of see what the ghost told me earlier. Grave decor is basically nullified by red skulls. I began to wonder if I could just dig up the annoying ones and remove these. I learned a few new forging-based technologies, buried the most recently delivered body, and started removing the broken stone grave decor I couldn't repair. Everything is exhausting, so it's sleepy time again. Then it was more replacing and gathering and crafting to facilitate that replacing, until finally, the graveyard quality had reached a total of +10. At last, just a few days from now, the secrets of the church will be mine. I slept till the dawn of day 16 to get all that sweet energy back, and set off on new avenues for progress. I upgraded the anvil to the iron tier, fully eclipsing the wooden anvil. I got about half the resources back, along with some metal scrap. The mission with this new anvil was to make the upgraded toolset, elevating from the rusty tier to the 1 tier, as it were. The benefits weren't immediately clear, but they seemed to be more efficient on energy, which I needed desperately, considering I'd still found no real way to offset the massive energy drain other than sleep. occasional forage, and these new energy potions I've been given by the blacksmith that I had no idea how to make more of. I learned weapons in the tech tree so I could hopefully make armor, but I need skin, which I do not have. Hard spares. Oh, the hard pieces that are spare from dead bodies. Okay. Right, guess that's where I get skin. I couldn't make the sword without access to the church, but skin. Yeah, skin. That I could find. Just as I was about to sleep, I received a new receivable. Says, we could skin. Found it. I needed a nap before I was ready to start ripping skin, but apparently the nap wasn't enough. Surgeon's mistake. Your inexperience shows the surgery didn't go very well. You've made a mess of the body, lowering its quality. The red skull started to get a bit rancid with this one, so I just harvested everything I could, and that seems like a good body to burn. I couldn't agree more. Sadly, I couldn't pursue cremation yet without blue points. Skin? You want skin? The skin thing had really gotten under my skin. Why don't we go see if there's witches burning? It is good to know we'll soon be burning another witch here. We're still torturing her. Guess not. He needed help with the campaign and asked me to get him firewood and flyers. Do I want this? Do I want to help with that? Great question. Stay tuned. I did a little log pushing and got to work on making complex iron parts, though I didn't yet know what they would be for. With a name like complex iron parts, you know we'll need them. Day 18's morning was all about making a mountain of firewood for smelting. With all my energy plus all my food, I stacked up a lot of fuel and was able to queue up a whole bunch of iron. I also had gotten these onion rings, which had an effect called beer thirst. I decided to test it and learned I'd get 5 extra energy from beer if I ate the onion rings first. Hopefully I'll keep my eyes open for more mechanics like this and not just completely forget this happened. I picked a few mushrooms and flowers for extra energy. I sold my burial certificate, bought a couple of beers to combo with the thirst, and suddenly I had a whole nother day in us in terms of energy. I wanted to work on the way into the west portions of the morgue, but I needed blue points to learn the circular saw, so that option was out. Instead, I took the time to fix this mortuary desk where I could build stations that seemed to have to do with bodies. Let's come back to this when I have some of those. The priest arrived, sort of. Not now. All right, well, how about now? How about now? And officially, the church was open for business. The bishop told me I needed to start holding prayers and speaking the words. Put out some extra decorations, some nice candles, music, incense, get all oiled up for a nice This priest is wild, man. I needed to acquire faith, and faith is power, apparently. I was given this casual prayer. May the force be with you. And also with you. I guessed I'd have to up my prayer game in the future. Fortunately, I got some new tech and a perk saying something about being able to make stories, which I'd eventually learned had to do with writing my own prayers. Guess the force wasn't gonna cut it. I went back outside to find this royal mailbox was functional. From head of Royal Treasury Department, we are happy to congratulate you. We are pleased to inform you about using these lands, you've become a royal on-ground structure. However, all surface land. Through this mailbox, you may not. Have a nice day, and remember, King Joe VII loves you. I feel so loved. Thanks, Joe. This box could be used to buy lots of things from the crown, like exhumation permissions and status titles, of which I grabbed the middle tier. Yes! We're rightful! Whatever that means! Back in the church, I went downstairs and realized the church was connected to the morgue via this downstairs area, but the fallen arches kept things cut off for now. I also perused the theology technology tree and was quickly overwhelmed by the depth of the game. I ran from the complexity of this for now and instead found this study table where I could study things. I needed an item to study, faith, and science. And science could be acquired by decomposing writings at the study table. I decided to study some of the flesh I'd pruned. Oh, that's a lot of blue though. I had 3 more science to spend and ended up with a total of 65 blue points from studying skin, chaos solution, and a skull as well. I had officially cracked into the next stage of what this game had to offer, and I could feel it. It was a lot of new options at once, and I needed to spend these rare blue points judiciously to make sure I didn't struggle for them again in the future. With big decisions on the horizon, it was time for another tactical nap. Surely nothing could complicate this any further. The thief? Surprise, things just got more complicated. As it turned out, no, this guy wasn't a thief. He introduced himself as Marquis Teodoro Jr., and he asked urgently for my help, with a promise of coin in return. He took me to a refugee camp full of what was supposedly a bunch of aristocrats that had apparently been wrongly accused as heretics and were in hiding due to some political scandal in the town by the Inquisition, and needed help with the basics like food and water. But being aristocrats, what? Aristocrats? But being aristocrats had plenty of money to pay for such services. Frankly, I needed to work on the basics too, considering I'd barely had anything to eat other than mushrooms and beer so far. So this seemed like a good arrangement. Teodoro introduced me to something like a village elder of the camp who was apparently hard of hearing. He asked me some very particular questions about where I came from, and I pretended, loudly, that I didn't know what he was talking about and left in a hurry. In the interest of not getting spread too thin between quest lines, I decided to return to my path from before the not actually a thief guy showed up, and look for the best ways to use the blue points. I chose this one, allowing me to chop down the big trees, be way better at getting resources from the small trees, and be more efficient with logs as a whole. I threw myself at the nearby trees, getting 4 logs per big tree. I made a bunch of wedges out of those logs, and had a power nap before making some simple iron parts. With these, and a circular saw with which to make wooden beams, I'd hopefully be able to start fixing the underground pathways of the church, and some of the other strange collapsed pathways to places. But I ran out of energy again. I also grabbed the tech for making notes so I could hopefully sustainably study for more blue points in the future. This also taught me the crafting station for him, the desk. But once again, I'd hit a new wall. I needed river sand to make paper out of ruined books, and I had no idea where to get that. Now, a sensible person might have checked the river, but not I. How am I supposed to get river sand? Why am I like this? Instead, I unlocked this technology so I could make paper out of skin. Okay, that's an option. This method would require this church workbench, which required some of those complex parts I'd made before. Now we can make clean paper out of pigskin paper. And I can make pigskin paper out of both bat wings and skin. I grabbed a couple more techs, one to get stories from NPC dialogues, and one to make a pen and ink for those lovely notes. I couldn't actually make the pen and ink, nor did I have any stories, so notes were still out of reach for now. Thankfully, decomposing clean paper with nothing on it still gives a small amount of science, so I wasn't completely high and dry. I could now reliably acquire science, and with the once-a-week faith, I finally had a reliable, albeit expensive, source of blue points. I find my lack of faith disturbing, but it was gonna be a little bit. I need the smelting, but I don't got the blue. After a quick snooze, I awoke to the blacksmith outside my door. He called our lovely home a dump and dragged us to the tavern, saying something about vampires? It never stops, does it? Horodrick had announced 3 people had died, and that we needed a solution. The suggestions offered by the villagers consisted of a plug for a porch fixing business, a guy who was really bad at math, a passionate vegetarian, and this dude, the beekeeper. His solution? Carnivorous bees. Please, sir, do not do that. But hey, an achievement is an achievement, baby. I was beginning to suspect these random quest lines popping up were DLCs activating, and I decided I'd revisit those a bit later on. But once I got home, this guy accused me of being the vampire and force-fed me garlic to make me prove I wasn't. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough, so I had to agree to find an actual vampire. But after that guy left, eating garlic, your mouth is burning. Okay, why am I taking damage? Wait, am I a vampire? Why am I taking so much damage from garlic? So, back to the tavern I went, only to find my first line of questioning was caught up in marital problems. Okay, but I was wondering about the vampire. I was wondering about the vampire! After a little back and forth of who cheated on whom, I eventually was redirected to the astrologer, who I still hadn't found. I wandered around, lost from all the sudden quests. Is anybody else confused? Like, there's so many things happening. I stumbled into this farmer, who I was apparently supposed to find earlier. He taught me some recipes, and I stole some of his crops. Back at home, I learned how to make glass, and wandered north to hopefully find something useful. What is this? I just got 27 coal? I had found some kind of infinite coal vein, and I simply couldn't help myself. Once my inventory was full of 500 coal, I ran home. Woo! Woo! And found bats. I came away with desperately low health, but also some bat wings shoved in my pockets with the coal. I also built this new trunk to hold my overflowing inventory. Nap time. In the morning, the bishop told us he was starting a soup kitchen to make himself look good. Of course. He wanted bowls for it and taught us how to gather clay and river sand. So that's how I was supposed to learn that. I immediately went to the river, dug up some of this stuff, learned how to make bowls, and completely forgot to hold a prayer for faith. What is this? Oh, is this a clay to... Oh! Whoa! And there was the clay. About time. I made this potter's wheel for bowl making from clay and water. This well provided a bucket of water, but I needed just water. So I ran around like a peanut, searching for some kind of crafting station to convert a bucket of water into just water. I have water, how do I use it? Just as I was about to ask around the town for help with water getting, I actually looked at the water in my inventory. Use this item to get water. Use. Oh, shit. I can't make this up, folks. I made some bowls for old boy. I tossed 200 of my sweet coal stores into this oven I found while I was mid-water shenanigans, so I could hopefully cook my own thing soon. I checked back at this mailbox and realized I hadn't picked up the rightful citizen papers or town pass I'd earned for purchasing rightful citizenship. Whoops. Let's have a snooze. I headed back to the tavern, planning to check on whatever this town was. I first asked Horadric about the farmland I've been walking around on, and he gave me permission to use it, teaching me how to make garden beds. Apparently the property was owned by some merchant who would show up on the Orange Horns Day, and it just so happened that that was today. We managed to chat through his constant hiccups, and after negotiating a 90% discount for the land, I was tasked with getting some weird hiccup grass thing for him, which I'd apparently find in the swamp. I found some relatively quickly, and after stumbling around the maze that this swamp was. Are you the gingerbread man? Excuse me, ma'am. There's a portal I'm probably supposed to talk to you about. This was a witch, I think, but she'd seemingly lost her memory. Her past self had left her a note on how to fix this, which required me to either make her a health potion or bring her the stuff to make said potion. She gave us these blueprints for potion making crafting stations, but I had no idea where to start with all that, as water had been a challenge earlier. So I resolved to find and bring her a cauldron. I took a day to build this bridge to avoid the maze part in the future, gave this maniac some firewood, and went to the blacksmith to inquire about a cauldron, but saw nothing of the sort. I decided to chase the alchemy making the potion route instead, but I had to make these glass flask things to progress here, but I didn't have the blue points to unlock such technologies. Who are you? Wait a minute. What? This was the astrologer, and I hoped he'd push me to wherever his place was where we could have a little chat. I ended up in the far east of the map at this lighthouse area. This guy sort of just trivialized all the issues I could possibly have and requested I bring him some illegal goods, a skull. To be honest, my guy, you asked the right man for the job. On the way to do just that, I ran into this guy, Dig, who seemed to be talking to himself. A little strange, but he told us he'd teach us how to make a cake in exchange for honey. Sure, why not? But one thing at a time, folks. Achievement unlocked, give an old man a dead head. In exchange, I asked him about that portal on Witch Hill thing, which he said the previous keeper had been obsessed with and had managed to activate. I also got a key for some door in the church to find the old keeper's diary buried somewhere in there. Key to find progression item behind locked door. This I can understand. On the way out, this dude said he'd introduce us to the wonderful world of fishing. He sure was enthusiastic. He also said he'd give us a rod if we brought him 6 moths? Okay, man, sure. Moths? How am I supposed to get moths? Turns out I have to learn beekeeping, then unlock insects once I had more blue points to comfortably spend on it. I gave Boss Man his bowls, and he teased me with the idea of a big church, but I had to get some more quality inside and out to achieve something like that. Also, he wanted some very particular cooked fish. Man, this guy is needy. I went and prayed on my own this time. I like to say a few words. Our church is great. Nice! And now, let us pray for this blessing. Nice, okay. Okay, nice. Your donations are welcome. Great sermon, great sermon, great sermon, great sermon, great sermon. Okay. Hey, money! Money! 3 faith and 30 copper. Sounds good to me. I went below to start working on that key business, but apparently I needed to find instructions for the key. You gotta be kidding me. It's a key! I also decided to go ahead and bury my little friend full of mistakes, despite the painful effect it had on my quality, because I really needed money. I decided to use that money immediately to buy this teleport stone from Horadric, which seemed to allow me to teleport to significant locations. That'll help. But first, let's check on that town finally. I have a town pass. Come right ahead, enjoy your visit to the town. Is this just open forever now? Are we just... Oh my god! What? Huh? Okay, what just happened? It seems like I'm alive and back home. According to Jerry, an ancient and powerful rage does not want me in the town. For some reason, I seem to think I needed to go there to get some magical items. This was news to me. Apparently talking with Snake was a better option? Okay. What if I just tried it again, though? Nope, I need a town pass for that, and mine had apparently been used up. Wow, at least the teleport stone actually worked as expected. I decided to start farming red points for the circular saw to make wooden beams so I could hopefully get to this snake fellow. I took a break from that grind to give Hiccup Man his grass, and right on cue, some sort of curse of his had activated, and he had lost the ability to taste. Apparently, I had to see a witch about that. I happen to know one, but she has no memory at the moment. A little grinding later, I learned the circular saw technology, and caught some Z's before spending the whole day crafting stuff so I could plop this new boy down right here. And with a little more crafting, I could at last make beams. I cleared out the first of these and ran out of energy for the second one. How about another nap? I'm gonna get to 100 days in this game and I'm gonna have done nothing. At least now the church and morgue were linked, and I had enough to see what this new area was. This path led to the village, and this one was closed for now, but I suspected it led to the tavern. Then I realized I could have just fixed these collapsed areas under my house for planks instead of beams, and still have had access to all of this. These were beams, those are planks, right? I didn't make the beams for nothing. Let's not talk about it. The donkey arrived to tell me he didn't like me anymore, because I was a capitalist now, and thus, he pooped on my road and left, and I may or may not have stepped in it. But there were carrot seeds in that poop. The farming could finally begin. I claimed the land with Hordrick's permission scroll and got an achievement letting me know I'd be here a lot. I started making garden beds and planted these carrot seeds in them. I sat back on the church fixing work and noticed the circular saw would function as a more efficient version of the carpenter's bench and sawhorse all at once. Suddenly, the energy currency was starting to make sense. I had to make better machines to use up less energy and make food to replenish it. I ran into this man, Snake, down here. I asked him about these items I apparently needed, but I, Watson, really had no idea how I knew that I needed these items. I was starting to have this sneaking suspicion I'd played another game out of order again. Did somebody tell me I needed those? Anyway, I needed to use some faith to converse with him further on the next Green Horns Day, so maybe it'll make sense by then? I cleared up the rest of the pathways and my cellar, found these recipes in a trunk, and saw the diary in a place I could not yet reach. Almost there. Time to pray. That was a fail, sadly, but I made a little faith and money, though not quite enough to convince Snake. I decided to allocate some of the faith instead to studying this bone, which allowed me to learn how to make stuff to improve the quality of the church. These benches would help me avoid failing prayers in the future, but I needed more. So I chopped a bunch of trees to make into church decor on day 38, and turned them directly into planks with the circular saw on day 39. I placed 2 more benches, and started looking for new options in the theology tech tree, though I ended up grabbing these insect gathering and glass blowing techs instead. Unfortunately, it didn't tell me where to get the insects when I did this, so I decided to chase the glass blowing. And surprise, I can't glass blow without the crafting station furnace too. And I didn't have the points to learn that either now. Let's not talk about it. I finished up crafting this stone garden, which allowed me to meditate. It seemed to be a less efficient sleeping option, so to speak, that didn't have a cooldown of being tired like sleeping. I also chopped a bunch of trees and found this butterfly when I picked a flower. So, in hopes of gathering moths, I started picking every plant I could find. I ran into some slimes while looking and was able to cook the slime they dropped into these jelly snacks. I also cleared this pathway here and found this little burnt down house with a grave behind it. I chose to loot the grave decor. He didn't need it anymore anyway. And pilfered the garden too, where I ended up finding a moth after all. At least now I knew where they came from. I could also apparently get bees when gathering honey. The slimes had come back today, so I got more jelly in my pockets. 30 energy a pop is not to be ignored. I spent most of the rest of the day looking for bees and moths, but all the honey harvesting had me a bit low on health though, and these bats just about did me in. Too bad I didn't have some way to teleport to completely avoid this. I had to snooze up a little extra time to make sure I healed up all that health 2. Bees hurt, man. I teleported over to the lighthouse, where I traded 6 moss for a new simple fishing rod, and teleported to the refugee camp, where I dropped off a bunch of water for these poor dudes, since now I knew where to get it relatively easily. Then, I decided to try out the fishing minigame. It took me a minute to grasp, but there were essentially 3 regions of cast distance, with 3 possible catches in each region, with the percentages modified by bait type. And this thing, called a gudgeon, could be caught without bait, and then subsequently used as bait. I ended up catching a few perch, and found out in-game time doesn't pass while fishing. I began to wonder if I could use this to sort of catch up in terms of days and money, but I couldn't sell the fish to the tavern guy, and the lighthouse fisher wasn't out. I did learn while in the area though, that the apple trees with 2 apples on the ground next to them could be harvested for apples. And again, since I was in the area, I gave this weird guy the honey he wanted, and learned how to make cake. Sure man, why not? This guy also apparently was a vendor, selling things like seed oil and hemp. Okay Dig, you keep doing you my guy. Now today is Purple Sunday, so you'd think I'd be holding a prayer to get more faith, right? Sadly, no. Instead, for some reason, I decided to spend all my faith on studying fish and sand. Brilliant, me. Great idea. I did make paper out of ruined books and sand, and got a few blue points from that. But I still needed 6 more to get Furnace 2, and I'd essentially just delayed that by a whole week with my flubbery here. Lost once again at the consequence of my own actions, I wandered into the tavern, learned Miss Chain here sold recipes that might be useful, before this lady started screaming. Oh! What? Walla boo! Dabby doo bamboo! You wanna be loved by me? No, I don't actually. Apparently I wanted to ask her some questions, but she rejected me immediately for not having enough faith in myself. Yeah, lady, I just spent it all on fish. What do you want from me? Croissant. Did she just say croissant? This dude also wanted to talk, and apparently he wanted something from that croissant lady. He needed paper and ink though, to write his poem for her. You and me both, buddy. Except not the poem part, never mind. Apparently, I could buy ink from the astrologer, so I'd have to check that next blue moon day. Faith check. I now need 5 for this lady, 5 for Snake, and more to study to get blue points. Too bad I didn't pray yesterday. I harvested and replanted the carrots, but I got fewer seeds back than I'd planted, which was tragically unhelpful. I went to try and sell some of this to the farmer, and ran into the farmer's son, who was apparently part of the vampire quest line. But the dude just said he'd hid from something under a blanket. How helpful. I wanted to turn the clock all the way around to Blue Moon Day for ink, so I decided just to burn through energy till then. So on day 45, I chopped trees like an absolute lumberjacking fiend. And on day 46, I cleared up the whole west side of the graveyard. And on the twilight of day 47, I dug clay until I couldn't see straight. And with logs now littering the grounds of my domicile, I TP'd to the lighthouse. I sold my perch to the fisherman there, and noticed I could buy the bishop's quality fish here. But not just yet, as I needed this money for... That guy. This dude had a treasure trove. He had ink, pen and ink, books that gave blue tokens when read, but I couldn't afford most of this. In order to penny pinch, I bought 1 ink and 1 feather separately. This unlocked his next vendor tier, and oh man did he have some spicy items. I went home to combine those 2, but for some reason, I needed 3 feathers to make a pen and ink. Dude, that's just mean. I'd noticed the chicken farmer had a little shop here with feathers and eggs, so I grabbed 2 more feathers at these extortionate prices. Upon combining, but I get 3 of them! Okay, that's much less awful. With 1 of these, clean paper, and some bronze tier stories I've been gathering by talking to people, I was able to craft notes. What? I got the pen and ink. It has a durability! Ah! This is when I learned that not only did I get 3 blue points for this, I also only used some durability of the pen and ink rather than consuming it entirely. Okay, this is much less awful. In fact, this might just be awesome. Yes! Yes! I proceeded to make as many notes as I could, and had enough blue points to acquire the advanced smithing technology for Furnace 2. And I was also able to combine 3 notes to make a chapter, which gave 5 more blue points. Yes! Make more notes! Yes! This game was really doing it for me, man. Buddy boy gotta get his boonky boo. I gotta make Furnace 2. I gotta make the second one. The sequel's coming out. I grabbed the skin from this dude who'd been waiting so patiently for me and turned it into 4 pigskin paper. With this and some complex parts, I destroyed Furnace 1 and smacked down Furnace 2. And now flasks were on the menu. Sand, coal, and water all had infinite sources, so I queued up as much glass as possible. I warped to the tower tavern to help out the poet, but he didn't accept pen and ink. He wanted ink by itself. Wow. Here's some paper, I guess. I perused the tech trees to find black paint to make ink out of for the picky poet, but came up empty. I noticed a few techs in the tree that required only red and green points, and I had a mountain of those from my 3-day deforestation spree. I went to grab some sleep before extracting these new things from our current corpse so I could study them, but I couldn't study them because somebody studied fish. Oh, and look, I slept through the prayer day again. I frantically tried to find my casual prayer and get to the podium in time, but it was too late. I've failed. I decided to leave this in the church from now on, so that didn't happen again. I also decided to pre-place a bunch of grave sites and bury the current body, since I was probably sabotaging that revenue stream by not actually burying them. And apparently, since I'd taken everything out of the body, it didn't harm the graveyard quality to just shove this in the ground. I took a moment to gather up all this lovely glass and start crafting one conical flask, as not only did I need them, but I had a theory that if writing gave blue tokens, this might too. While waiting on that, I learned decay in the farming tree, presumably to make some form of fertilizer, but I wasn't really sure. It does make blue. Oh my god. And just like that, blue points could now be made infinitely, with water, sand, coal, and time. It took the first half of the entire 100 days, but I solved the single biggest problem so far. Now if I could just remember to get faith. And the donkey decided to make things more difficult. He'd gone on strike, and now he wanted oil for his cart before bringing any more bodies, and 5 carrots per body from now on. I had the carrots on deck, but the oil was a mystery to me, and here I thought I'd solve the body delivery problem. I decided to press the advantages I did have, and went to get more sand for glass for basically the entire day. By day 52, all the trees had begun to regrow from all the random lumber piles I'd left around the grounds, and I decided to poke down at that vampire questline again. So I tracked down Rosa, the shepherd's wife, and asked her what happened to her. Evidently, she'd been attacked in her barn, but the thing drinking her blood spat it out and complained about Group B. Is this vampire aware of blood types? I got nothing. I wandered, confused by this game once again, and found this fishing spot where I fished up more gudgeon, a tilapia, and a perch, which I immediately sold. I decided to learn how to make flyers and a better prayer for money on day 53, and made 10 flyers for the Inquisitor's witch-burning nonsense. We must go to the Inquisiboy and give him the Inquisiflyers for his Inquisi-witching, his inquitching. I handed the Inquisiman with a plan, his flyers, and had a lovely moment watching a witch burning together. Unfortunately, the other villagers didn't much care. Apparently this same thing had been happening for 5 years, and now it was a bit boring. He wanted to motivate his guards to help get more witches for a better performance, and asked me to start growing grapes for wine for them. He also casually mentioned that witches killed his wife and son. Ah, now this is starting to make sense. Anyway, we had this extra area now to grow wine in, but I didn't exactly have the seeds just yet. I decided to wait on this and headed home for a snooze. I found this campfire afterwards where I could burn sticks for cooked apples or mushrooms, and I probably should have been doing this for a while now. The fog rolled in and it was time for... I bought a single thing of ink, which I brought to this picky poet in the tavern. After a bit of blathering, I learned I could now exchange silver wine for a silver story at will. Didn't even want that. Didn't even need it. Didn't even ask. When did I ask? Yeah, that was a waste of money. But you know what wasn't a waste? These flasks, baby. With the blue points they provided, I learned how to make advanced flasks, which, as I suspected, cost conical flasks. Perfect. Alchemy, here we come. I farmed out some water, brought it to the refugee camp I was actively neglecting, and left them a few berries because I was feeling generous. I returned home, acquired my first advanced flasks, and had to explain to Jerry that I don't actually support the Inquisition. Guess he's been spying on me. I'd grabbed permission from that Inquisition to use this other half of the graveyard I'd cleared, and actually remembered to pray this time. Great sermon, great sermon, great sermon, great sermon, great sermon, great. I scored 4 faith and 21 copper, which was a whole lot more than the 0 from the past 2 weeks. I decided to put this faith away so I could hopefully remember to not spend it, and I built this alchemy workbench. It had 2 slots to put things in, but oh no, you're not gonna tell me what to do? I'm totally blind? Is this gonna be a trial and error process? Yes, it is in fact about to be an incredible amount of trial and error. I pretty much just started constantly queuing up glass and baked apples whenever I could, and began to explore this new, strange aspect of the game. My first attempt was to mix blood and water, in that order, and received goo of death. Okay. I decomposed my chapter that I had made to get a whopping 15 science. Then I studied this death goo, without spending faith, thankfully, and learned it could be decomposed into 3 particular forms: powder, fluid, and essence. Okay, I tried combining some stuff I'd found in here when I'd unlocked the church, and made slowing goo, which had the same decomposition options. By that point, I was out of things to try, and I was very confused. So don't worry if you are too, I make some more sense of this later. I decided to study a brain before I left, which of course cost 3 faith. I'm not too good with this faith thing, am I? But it gave 50 blue points. That seemed pretty worth it. Yeah. I had wanted to learn some more things, like grape farming, gardening, bee domestication, and winemaking. You know what, let's make some grapes. I dug out these trellises, but was surprised to not find any grape seeds here. I checked the farmer, but he wasn't selling them either. I bought a few other seeds, and planted a whole 3 crops, but was once again quite lost. I unlocked this candle tech, hoping to be effective in some manner, and saw we could make candelabras pretty cheaply. I could not for the life of me figure out how to put a wall candelabra on the wall, but the standing ones I was able to spam down to bring the total to 17 points. But I couldn't make candles for them, so I only got 1 point apiece. And speaking of candles, I went on a hunt for white paint to try and make one of the candle types, and I thought maybe water and colored flowers might be the answer. But I came up empty once again, costing me my last faith. I also tried to bake some sliced raw meat on this campfire, but that was a no-go. Too bad I don't have like an oven or something next to this table. I went ahead and decommissioned the sawhorse since I had the circular saw to replace it, and in the process of that, increase yard space. Hoo-wee, that looks important. On day 59, I struggled to hunt for bees to hopefully start farming the beeswax for the candles, and cobbled together the resources for the increased yard space. And on day 60, I completed the expansion. Look at all this room. I added a new furnace too to start smelting glass in one and conical flasks in another for super duper red point and blue point generation, and I searched for bees on the way to gather more coal for the new furnace. And as soon as I got there, nice. Then I stumbled into something strange. It was apparently a cabin in the woods and came with several different areas, like this unbuilt marble quarry and this mine full of toxic gases. Someone who doesn't need to breathe? Fortunately, this was a new teleport location, so we can check into this more later. It's Prey Day, and I cannot miss it. It was nice and crowded today. This time we scored 5 faith, which is just what we needed. I fueled the new furnace, learned I was only graphite away from being able to make steel, and went to go see Snake with all this faith. But he wasn't there. Back to the furnace then. I queued up 69 conical flasks, nice, and TP'd back to the good old cabin in the woods. I found this, seemingly an ore vein, which dropped these thick slabs of ore, but I didn't know how to use these yet. I did some nearby exploration and found this fallen pathway. So I grabbed some supplies, built the marble quarry, which dropped these weird marble slabs, and went south to repair this pathway. This ended up just being another path to the swamp. So I didn't really need to do this, but the witch with no memories wanted a pumpkin, so sure, why not? I did some more bee hunting on day 63, and noticed these poor refugees could have a whole water well if I just brought them some stone. Bam! Well, it's easy to give them water now, I think. Maybe they'll get it themselves? On day 64, Snake was back. This is when I actually figured out that Greenhorn Day was his day. I used that 5 faith I'd finally saved, and found out this guy had the instructions for the key I'd gotten before. I grabbed the key, and these lovely points that were just generating, and went to study the key. But I needed faith to do that. I gathered some of the thousands of logs I had, strewn about the entire cosmos, and made some winemaking barrels for the cellar. This might be a bit of a cart before the horse kind of situation, but let's be honest, that's just default procedure for me at this point. I grabbed this Power of Faith tech to grab more things for improving church quality, and smacked down a confessional here and a shrine here in place of some of them candleless candelabras. Though I couldn't quite finish that shrine just yet, but at least it doesn't cost energy to do this. Oh! The confessional actually produced faith and a story on the next day, and I finished up this shrine, bringing the total quality up to 23. the bishop would surely be pleased. I went around looking for who sold hemp or hemp seeds, but I couldn't remember where I'd seen them before. I noticed Horadric had firewood in his inventory though, and that got me thinking. I headed home, harvested my crops at a better rate with a new perk from the tech tree, but still didn't get enough seeds to replant. I sold the crops, bought the seeds I needed to replant, and realized growing crops and selling them was an overall profitable venture. After a quick and hopeful replant, I put effort into adding a compost heap and some new plots with sticks this time. The sticks were apparently improvements somehow. I'm still not sure why. I went to hold a good old prayer, and the bishop congratulated me on my improvements to the church. I held another casual prayer in our delightful church, and ended up with some surprisingly mixed results. But 7 faith is a huge win in my book. Time to study this key, baby. With the instructions and the faith and the science, the key! But it is the keeper's key. I got an active key and a keeper's key. Sadly, I had to wait for Snake to actually open the gate, but I still had enough faith left over to deal with that snooty lady soon. I accidentally clicked on this exhumation permission thing and accidentally dug this body up that was ruining our graveyard quality and accidentally tossed it on this table to subsequently butcher later. Don't know how that happened. I chopped a bunch of firewood, getting this achievement for gathering 1,000 red points. The description of it gaslit me into thinking that they decay, or that something does at least, so I spent my points on these things just in case. Then, with this firewood, I went to the tavern, and money! I completely leveled him all the way up as a vendor and acquired more money than I'd ever had at once. Firewood is officially goated. I took my newfound confidence over to this Miss Charm lady and traded 5 faith in exchange for her to take me seriously. If only it was that easy in the real world. This was a strange conversation to be sure, but that's nothing new at this point. She was apparently upset with Snake for something, and gave me fake coins to give to him. And she knew a couple things about where to get a town pass, also relating to Snake. Frankly, Miss Charm, I am not charmed. How was this helpful to me? And why do I want a town pass? I don't want to get struck by lightning again. You know what I do want though? Money. Let's make some more firewood. And that's what I did for almost all of day 69 was make wood, along with a little stick work in the garden. I took a break from the incessant chopping on day 70 and handed this man these weird coins, only to be ridiculed for doing something someone asked me to do. Then I handed him the key, which is something he'd asked me to do, and he was ecstatic. We love hypocrisy here. It's okay, Snake. We started talking, but I couldn't be bothered to pay attention apparently. Oh wait, oh stop, oh wait, oh stop, wait! I couldn't stop him. I couldn't stop him. I had to go back and get that diary. Okay. Dude, really? Did you not see it coming? Can I just die when and why ever I want with no inhibition or concerns whatsoever? Yes, apparently. Snake loudly expressed his jealousy for the fact that I'm clearly immortal, and then had the bright idea to ask us to do something. The church basement apparently had this dungeon in it? Guess they had to deal with the heretics somehow. And Snake didn't want to die, you know, permanently, trying to get some important items from within its treacherous depths. You know, I can understand that, honestly. My character also heard somebody calling for help, so I walked over to see what that was all about. And of course, what else could it be other than a literal, sentient, masochistic zombie chained to the wall? This game does not quit. Once I'd fulfilled his needs, he told me the keeper before me had made a bunch of zombies to help him maintain the graveyard. But this one, Gunter, had accidentally been smart, hence why he's chained to a wall. Supposedly, with this zombie juice, as well as this reanimation table, I could reanimate corpses and make dumb zombies to help around the grounds with anything from gathering to crafting. And if I wanted to make more zombie juice, you know, if 3 wasn't enough, I had to combine the particular first ingredient that he couldn't remember with blood as the second ingredient. Okay. Yeah, so I went back to where I'd shown off my immortality, walked around my previous skeleton, and picked up the diary I've been trying to get a hold of since day 30. I decided to check on what that dungeon might look like, and it was lootable. It was dangerous. It was what I've been waiting for all my life. I didn't stay for long because swinging the sword still costs energy, but this was definitely something useful right here. But without overflowing stores of energy replenishing food or potions, I was far from ready to tackle it. Gunter had also mentioned something about a zombie brother of his under a rock somewhere in the north that we could use to learn more about zombie stuff, so I went looking. But I couldn't seem to figure out where that'd be. That was a lot in one day. Let's take a minute and just do some crops, shall we? I made a bunch of storage for the farm area because snacks were becoming more and more important. I also figured out I could put the crop waste in the compost heap to make peat. I sold the farmer my crop yield and so much firewood that he wouldn't even pay for more, and headed home with my bounty. I chopped more firewood because everybody needs to be warm, right? More firewood on day 72. I went to the astrologer hoping I could sell him my conical flasks too, but sadly he didn't want either. But I do have this diary. The diary evidently said I needed to craft something called a spirit laser using the pedestal on Witch Hill, and it was crafted in 2 parts, an emitter and a barrel. The emitter itself had 3 parts, and these were the parts I'd told Snake I needed back on day 32. Yep, played a game out of order again. The barrel's construction instructions were covered in something sticky, so the astrologer tasked us with acquiring acid and some contraband restoration tools to alleviate this terribly suspicious issue. Supposedly, the witch in the swamp sold the acid, and once again, Snake was the best option for getting the illegal tools. This little rogue and I are going to be doing a lot of business, aren't we? I went to the blacksmith hoping to sell my firewood, and I learned the exact amount people would pay for was 198. Fair enough. Here's 198 then, Mr. Cresvold. I relieved this guy of all his organs and used up the rest of my firewood as fuel because I suspected the firewood money train had ended. I made this hand mixer in the hopes of getting a better handle on alchemy. And decided to mix up some brains with my hands. How dreadful. It made something called life solution, which sounded promising, but mixing it with blood produced ash goo, and mixing it with water did the same. I'm just gonna warn you again, this alchemy thing was a massive challenge to do without any help, but hang in there. How am I supposed to get acid? I may or may not have missed the part about the witch and thought I had to make the acid. I told everyone our church was great, and I got 7 faith and 24 copper for it. I snagged this tech, which was all about money via church stuff, and made this prayer for donations. I also unlocked cremation, so I pushed around some wood and made storage and a burning spot for a body down here. And now, at the place where I prepare my food, I could make burial urns with the ashes of the body on my cooking table. Everything's fine. Everything is okay. I'd managed to finally make stone repair kits, so I patched up a couple things in the graveyard, but let's be real, I'm just gonna burn you all later. But before those shenanigans, let's go see what that fake money was about. Tell him to give back my money, real money this time, and if he can't find my mother's necklace, then the deal is off. So, translation, Snake seems to have conned her. Maybe we can fix that? Yeah, let's burn some flesh first. I threw some pottery in this furnace to make the ceramic jugs I could make urns out of, and while I waited... Oh! Sure, why not? Salt? So we can do that now. Now what the fuck do I do with this? I'm still not sure, honestly. I decided to keep them by my bed, like a normal person. And I tried mixing some salt from the body with water and made electric goo somehow. I had enough money at this point, so I snagged this silver wine from the tavern, since Jerry had been patiently waiting, hoping it somehow progressed the game in a sensible way. The alcoholism just kept growing though, as he now requested cognac. The ingrate wanted me to go digging around the northeastern part of the village for cognac eggs that would just be buried in the ground. Supposedly, I'd learn something cool and important if I succeeded. Okay, Jerry, I kinda think you're lying, but I have no choice because it's a quest now. I went looking and dug a few random piles from which I got useless items, but this one had an archaeological machine in it. from the keeper before me. Apparently that was the one who'd come up with the zombie idea. But the law got in my way. I wasn't allowed to dig this up, according to the blacksmith, unless I was a landowner. So I can burn bodies at my leisure, tell empty prayers to my flock, and reanimate corpses willy-nilly, but digging in unoccupied land, that's a no-no, folks. Jerry's diabolical plan to circumnavigate this issue was to just buy some land and build a tavern on it. Genius. Let me just go ask the guy in charge, the tavern owner, how he feels about that. I'm sure he'll love giving up his monopoly and will give me a great price for the land. Oh, guess not. Apparently I could dodge this hefty price by using the name of an old man, like Dig? Ethics are really just a guideline here, aren't they? I went to check on the pedestal on Witch Hill, but the Inquisitor's guards stopped me from getting any closer. Evidently, I'd have to deal with that. I asked Snake about the necklace Miss Charm had ranted about, but he seemed guarded about it. I ran the restoration tools question by him too, but I couldn't hire him. Instead, I'd have to help him with his life's goal, which I'm sure meant dungeoneering would be required. He wanted buckets of blood and bloody nails, and technically I could craft the bucket, but the blood cost was very steep, so I figured this was not the ideal path. I decided to run the land idea by good old Dig, but he just said, dear cake, let me take, let you bake, to everything I said. I decided this meant he was chill with it, and checked his store while I was here. And that is seed oil. I wonder. I told Horadric Dig was fine with it, definitely, and the cost of the land became 10,000 times cheaper. Nice! I planted some hemp seeds I'd bought from Dig, and went to the donkey. I've got some oil for your wheels. Yes! A body! Yes! 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 Give me everything. All of it. I want your entire body. Every single piece of your body is mine. And the body delivery is back online. Let's make some salt too. The newly oiled up communist donkey came to us with an ultimatum on day 77. The Eco-Po Dip has decided to let you give one last chance to rehabilitate yourself in the eyes of enlightened labor. I had to either join their revolutionary cause or have everything I know and love burned to the ground. Specifically, I had to make a contraband box and provide the special goods in it. I built the requested box easily and sent some apples immediately. Look at this symbol! Oh my god! I also needed to make and send a cookbook for a rat chef, of course, and that looked like more of a challenge. I asked the Inquisitor about removing his soldiers from the portal, offering to look after it myself, but I had to prove my loyalty to be in charge of guarding such a thing, and that meant I'd need to make that wine. I went to buy it for him, only to realize he wanted 10, not 1. Well, 10% there, I suppose. I figured out how to use the human salt to make sauerkraut, which was at least some kind of food for energy. Then cook. This is an oven. Shut the f up. How long has this existed? No! 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 How long has this been here? No! How long has this been here, bro? No! No! I'm an idiot! Yeah, I forgot about this for 51 days since fueling it up. I left my home in shame, liberated a new body of its parts, and burned it in the rain. I held a little prayer while the body was burning outside, which I'm sure was inspiring. I'd used the new prayer for donations I'd made, and boy oh did it work. I harvested my first hemp and baked my first meat from the human flesh I'd sliced. Sounds tasty. The considerable amount of body parts I had was becoming a bit much, so I started working on the stuff to make storage in the bowels of the church. I also started making dough for bread for sandwiches now that I finally knew about this oven. I tossed down this alchemy rack later in the day and scored plenty of space for all these lovely body pieces. I tried combining these two ingredients, but it was just ash goo again. I made some hemp rope down here as well for future candle making, and grabbed this body and did the usual, along with making some more alchemy racks. I also swung by the merchant late in the day, where I finally found grape seeds. I was feeling pretty good about my situation at this point. What a lovely combination. We're cooking bread and we're cooking people. I planted my first 2 grape plants up here in the Inquisition's land and made my first human meat sandwiches. I also studied these red mushrooms and learned I could hand mix toxic solution. I realized I hadn't yet studied the intestines or hearts, and I got a bunch of blue points and a story out of studying the intestines, which I'm not sure if I ever want to hear. I still couldn't hand mix these new organs though, and I hadn't yet worked out why. I made some candles from fat, beeswax, and hemp rope finally, and did a final study of bat wings. I was able to hand mix this, and made chaos solution. What do I do with this thing? I was still quite confused by the alchemy in this game, but I did make my first softcover. I suspected I'd need to craft a whole book to make that rat cookbook for La Révolution. Can I take this time to point out how many blue tokens I have? I may have floundered with many of the problems, but I solved that one. I placed these candles, which buffed each candelabra by 1 point, reviewed all my quests, and went on another search for that zombie who was apparently rubble at entrance to woods. Rubble at entrance to woods. Rubble at entrance to woods. And after having to ask Gunter again and floundering all day with every single rock I could find, I found this. Hello, Mr. Zombie. You're looking fairly undead at the moment. At this point, I was confused what to do with Mr. Zombie because he was already a zombie, so I wasn't sure if I still needed the resurrection table for him. I took the parts out of this normal body and, I figured out I could put the zombie on the autopsy table and saw his parts along with the work efficiency. I tried to insert the zombie juice here, but that didn't work. Gunter didn't have any more advice for me, except that the first ingredient for the resurrection thing was a powder. I technically hadn't yet put together that the resurrection equipment Gunter was talking about was the zombie juice I already had 3 of. So I decided to try making an alchemy mill to presumably make powders, but I needed this polished stone. On the way to try to figure that out, I learned the candles were not permanent, which was disappointing, but understandable. I remembered to do the free money from my flock thing. Then I learned stoneworking to polish stone. I can either do it with polishing paste, which I don't have, or an iron chisel, which I don't have. Sound familiar? Luckily, I was actually able to craft a chisel already, and I made Stonecutter 2 to improve and replace the old one. And good news, the chisel was a durability item like the pen and ink, so I'd at least have this a little longer. I slapped down this alchemy mill and tested her out with a batwing. Chaos powder, perhaps? This is when the gears started to really turn, folks. Remember how the item said, can be decomposed into? Batwings could be decomposed into either a fluid or powder. But regardless, the result was chaos something. In other words, the resulting form depended on the distillation process. I got life powder from the intestines and white powder from bones. I tried combining this with water to make white paint, but just ended up with electric goo again. I decomposed everything that I could only decompose one way and ended up with lots of life solution, life powder, and white powder. Combining life powder and blood made oil goo, which was curious, and I learned fat could be made into slowing solution. Strange, since I already had slowing goo. There was a whole lot more studying and experimentation, and I ended up with all these ingredients before questioning the source of essences, the third type of decomposition, distillation cube. I made one and started distilling a heart in it, which cost no energy, but instead takes time. This is when I realized that powders could only go in the first slot of the alchemy workbench, and solutions could only go in the second. Things like water and blood could go in either slot. I tried chaos powder and blood and got goo of health, and that sounded promising. Interestingly, blood first and chaos solution second also gave goo of health. The heart distilled into life essence, but I couldn't use essences for anything, so I figured I would need an upgraded alchemy bench for that. I had no more blood to make the fourth and final goo of health I'd need to do something with the goos, but on a whim, I tested salt and chaos solution. Goo of health! Well, that was lucky. I used it and the hand mixer and made health solution. But sadly, I had no clue what to do with this, so I tried combining it with water. Salt goo. I ruined it. A tragedy, genuinely. I made 3 more goos of health from what I had, and resolved to try more of this later. I decided to take out my frustrations in the dungeon, and hopefully snag some batwings along the way. The place was huge, with lots of pots to break. Heal potion! Oh, the irony. Fine by me. Hello, Mrs. Witch, here's a really old health potion. She got her memory back immediately, taught me a recipe to help the merchant of his curse, which just so happened to have a health solution in it, and then showed me her shop full of so many awesome things. I didn't have nearly enough to afford all the lovely stuff she had, but I bought the acid for the astrologer and some acceleration powder to try for the zombie juice. I quickly sold some burial certificates I've been hoarding to hopefully snag this alchemy recipe too, and learned how to make green paint. Not really what I was looking for, but sure. Only one problem: where did that just go? What did you do with it? I had no idea what the actual recipe was or where to see it. Worse still, I was out of carrots, so no new bodies were coming, and I had no more blood to use.
How am I supposed to know these recipes? Where are they?
Oh, they're right here. Great. Okay, found him. In my frustration, I'd forgotten salt was an option for making goo of health, so I just lamented my lack of blood. I studied jelly on a whim, and was surprised to learn it actually has some serious uses. I made order solution out of it. This is when I looked more closely at the green paint recipe, and noticed I needed to order powder for it. But sadly, jelly couldn't be decomposed into powder. However, it was enough to notice that paint was made with a colored powder and oil, not water. Well, I was close. At this point, I realized this stuff was just too complicated to achieve without writing everything down, so I whipped out a notebook and started taking notes. After a quick snooze, I handed old boy his acid and dropped by the farmer's to grab carrot seeds, but I couldn't afford enough to plant. Thankfully, I had enough spare at home to be able to plant one whole crop, and I got my first peat, which I used to fertilize some plots, and planted some hemp in one of them. I tried the same with my first batch of grapes. I prayed on pray day and learned the maggots I got from fertilizer production also produce life solution. Brains or maggots? Let's not think about this one too much. I wanted to make vine presses for the grapes, but I had no iron left, so I went to investigate how to use this quarry to better effect. I made an iron ore stockpile and a stone cutter, and started converting them into things I could carry home. This was very energetically costly though. I used what I had and poked around in the dungeon again, where I noticed the mobs don't seem to respawn while I'm gone. I'd managed to make it all the way to floor 2 by the beginning of day 93. I made it all the way to these scroll and bookshelves, which actually had empty storage, which I have to say is strange to see in a dungeon. Just as I could see the way down to level 3, I realized I was taking so much damage because I'd never once made armor. Imagine that. I jumped in technology all the way to steel tools and armor, since I'd been neglecting this for so long, and said this: it would be cool to have not just a random tunic that probably has like the body fluids of 25 different people on it that are all dead. I'm not wrong, but why did I have to say it like that? Weapons? I already had this? I already could have just... I don't even, wait a minute, I ain't even gotta do steel. I just ain't made no sword, no iron. I could have done this a long time ago. I finally remembered to smell the iron I went and got, harvested carrots for the comrade, and planted onions from the dungeon among the day's crops. I also stole Mr. Zombie's blood to try the acceleration powder theory I had, because that'd been the only powder I'd found down here when I first unlocked the basement. But this combo just made slowing go. Then I realized I didn't even have enough skin to make the new equipment. I had just enough carrots to call the comrade, and I exhumed a body to get a head start on the skin and blood needs. Time to do the usual. I started combining life powder and blood, but had to catch a nap before I could finish. When I returned to finish it, it made goo of health, which wasn't exactly what I wanted, but was enough to let me make health powder, and the zombie juice just so happened to be green. Very curious, but I once again lacked the blood to test it with. And I'd forgotten to burn the body, so I didn't get a new one today. At least I think that's how it works. And on day 96, I finally replaced the rusty sword with something much better. Half the energy to swing, and more damage. I still didn't have the skin for armor, and folks, I really don't know why I didn't try this earlier, but I finally built a resurrection table. And yet...
Does this not count because it's a zombie already? So how do I turn a zombie back on?
I really couldn't figure out how to re-resurrect this guy, and I'd been trying for so long. I had just been delivered a new not-zombie body and placed it on the resurrection table. Evidently, I could resurrect this guy with 1 zombie juice and 10 faith.
What do I do with zombie crushed by Boulder McGee?
Mr. Zombie had really given me so much trouble. I'd made this pallet and mortuary storage to help me juggle these 2 guys to try to figure this out, and I held a prayer to snag some faith for undead shenanigans. And just when I went to try,
cannot resurrect body is rotten.
Well, let's do the usual. But now, I had blood. Let's try something.
I didn't even finish it. I was braced. Oh, I got it! Yeah!
It was a struggle, folks, but I now know how to make zombie juice forever and always. This is going to be essential to getting things roiling here on the graveyard. I did a couple things while waiting for a new body like these skull decorations for Snake, and this health solution to make spices for the merchant. But then, Comrade brought a new body.
I made a zombie. Cool. What do I do with it?
I now had another inactive zombie with no idea what to do about it, but I'd made one at least. This spawned an idea. Maybe they were inactive until placed at a zombie station. So I unlocked this zombie porter station, which after a short fumble, I worked out was to get zombies to bring resources from the cabin quarry to the home sweet home, and I could choose what I wanted transported via the station itself. I teleported Mr. Zombie number 2 with me to the cabin, and he just started walking away. I snatched him up, and he'd been carrying this iron ore, which was now, presumably, on the way home. Super weird, but also super awesome. Me and Mr. Zombie number 2 went on a walk together all the way home, where he didn't drop off the ore. I quickly worked out this was because I didn't have an ore stockpile here, so I slapped one down for the future. But what if I got the zombies doing the stuff that costs energy? I unlocked the tech for zombie versions of the decomposers and alchemy workbench, and I built the glorious zombie alchemy workbench on day 100. Sadly, I still had no recipes to tell the dude to make, so Mr. Zombie 1 just kinda sat there. I made some spices for the merchant, and Mr. Zombie 2 brought home that iron ore for real this time. Man, I should probably give him better names. Day 1 had started at high noon, so we had only till high noon on the Inquisitor's day to tie up any loose ends, and I really wanted all this effort in the zombies to shine. I made this zombie alchemy decomposer, which essentially replaced the 3 stations I'd already made, specifically for decompositions I'd already learned. Perfect! So now I only ever had to do anything alchemically by hand when I was experimenting to find new recipes and such. Anything I already knew, the zombies could take care of. He's making it. He's making it. He's doing it, and I'm not using my energy. It's happening. This helpful guy even stored the powder on the shelves for me too. Excellent. I wanted to time the main menu's counter exactly right, so I sold the remaining burial certificate I had, crafted a couple random things, and slept until exactly high noon on day 101, and exited out to see a beautiful 100.0 days played. Poised for industrialized undead success, this chapter of the story ends here. But this game looks like it has a lot left to offer. So if you want to see 200 days, let me know down in the comments below. And then watch me play the beloved Stardew Valley for my very first time right here. Or if you want more Graveyard Keeper, watch my Let's Play the game here.